The flute as a lead instrument in rock music? Yeah, this is a very strange combination to add to any rock ensemble, but Jethro Tull had great success with this in the 70s. Over a huge slew of albums of classic material, Jethro Tull really ruled the roost in the 70s as one of the biggest bands in the entire world. They are one of my very, very favorite bands. I've talked about Jethro Tull a lot on this channel. And like my Led Zeppelin video, I thought it would be kind of an interesting practice to try to put together some kind of top 10 songs. Now, like Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull have just a plethora of amazing tracks. I mean, Jesus, amazing albums even. I mean, just look at some of the stuff behind me, and that's just like a small sampling of what you get from this very, very unique and awesome band. The thing I always loved about Jethro Tull was just how inventive they were, how fearless they were, particularly their enigmatic frontman Ian Anderson, main songwriter, flautist, singer. Ian really embodies this entire spirit of the band. It's very much his project. As important as the other musicians are, it is very much Ian's thing. But just a fearless guy in terms of creativity and just writing what he wants to write. And he's still doing it, God, into the seventh decade, I believe. He's in his 70s. So, I mean, Jethro Tull have been around a long time, have had a long history, and have had tons of songs. How do you narrow down such an epic career in 10 songs? It's really, really difficult. Especially for me, Jethro Tull is probably in my top 5 favorite bands of all time. So how do I pick 10 of my favorite songs by one of my favorite bands? And while I'm not, I would say, familiar with every single thing that they've done, I've heard each album at least once. I know most of their albums quite well. And so this was a really, really difficult task for me to try to come up with a definitive top 10 list. So I did my best to narrow it down. I tried to have the approach of like, okay, what are the tracks that I would want someone who isn't quite as familiar with Jethro Tull to try to hear, to maybe try to get them into the band. But that's a small part of this. I really, really, really tried to make this my 10 favorite Jethro Tull songs. And like pretty much any other list of this kind, this list, especially with songs, can just change over and over and over again, like by the minute. So more than likely, by the time I post this video, my list will be different than by the time I recorded the video. So, don't be surprised by that if I ever talk about Jethro Tull again, which I'm sure I will. Again, one of my favorite bands. I'm sure the list will change. But that said, let's talk about the top 10 Jethro Tull tracks. And of course, first we're going to do an honorable mentions. I'm going to do 6. I think I did that for Led Zeppelin. So let's start out with Jack in the Green. Have you seen the Jack in the Green? Off of Songs from the Wood. One of my very, very favorite Jethro Tull albums. Might even be my favorite on some days. This is a great acoustic number. Very whimsical, English folk sounding. The lyrics are very, very intriguing. Very it's not just about like a little imp guy who champions the greenery in the winter or anything like that. It's got a little bit of a deeper message, but this is a fun little folk tune. Really, Songs from the Wood, Heavy Horses, and Stormwatch, the folk trilogy as it's known, have become 3 of my very favorite Jethro Tull albums. You're going to see a lot of this album represented on this list, and this is just a fun little acoustic tune that I think really, really just follows the opening / title track really well. So Jack in the Green, really hard not to put this one on the list. Love this song. Also from the folk trilogy, from the album Heavy Horses, which was the follow-up to Songs from the Wood, Moths. Another amazing acoustic track, beautiful melody. I mean, this could have easily made the list. It was very, very, very hard not to put this on the list. I really, really love this track. Probably my second favorite track off of Heavy Horses, so, expect to see another track on here somewhere. But yeah, I love this piece. It's so good. Just the acoustic guitar, the other little acoustical instruments, the melody of it, Anderson's vocals, the whole thing is just fantastic. The flute solo, amazing stuff. Very rustic sounding, like the whole, particularly the Heavy Horses album, but this whole period, amazing song. And why not finish up the folk trilogy on the honorable mentions with something from Stormwatch. And this next song is Orion. Amazing track, very epic. I think it's the second track on the album. A little bit of a theme here, yeah. Yeah, Jack in the Green was also the second track on Songs from the Wood, for those who don't know. But yeah, Orion, epic song. Orion, won't you give me a star sign? It was such a really cool lyrics to that track. Very interesting blend of acoustical and electrical instruments. Anderson's his voice is just really powerful on this track. Some of his very best singing was during this period, and I think this is one of those songs that showcases his vocals really, really, really well. He has a very unique voice. I wouldn't say he has his voice isn't this beautiful operatic thing, but he uses it so well. He is a great singer, and his style is so uniquely his own, and it really shines on this song. Really cool, like, dark track. I love Orion, and I love Stormwatch. Talking about Ian Anderson's vocals, I want to talk about this. So it's really hard to talk about two albums, actually. Thick as a Brick and A Passion Play, which are both essentially one-song albums. Yeah, so it's hard to talk about songs when you have two albums of theirs that are literally one song, or two songs. But the only reason it's two songs is because the LP is split, so there's side one and side two, but it is one long continuous piece. Thanks to the genius that is Steven Wilson, who've done all of the Jethro Tull remixes. He has kind of split up those two albums into smaller tracks. So again, talking about Ian Anderson's vocals, I want to specifically talk about the silver chord section of A Passion Play. A very divisive album. Maybe not so much amongst Tull fans, because I think Tull fans like A Passion Play a lot, but maybe amongst the band themselves and critics as well, who kind of saw it as sort of their kind of overblown prog album. I think it's a great album, and I really think this piece, the silver chord, is perhaps Ian Anderson's best vocals on any track. That's why I put it on here. As far as the song itself goes, I really love it. I don't even know if I'd put it in the honorable mentions, though, even though it's so good. If it wasn't for the fact that I really, truly think these are Ian's best vocals. So, I mean, if you want to hear, like, just the best of what I believe he is capable of doing, listen to that silver chord track off of Passion Play. It's phenomenal. I also want to talk about the album Minstrel in the Gallery, and another honorable mention is Cold Wind to Valhalla. Again, another really cool acoustic. This is a bit more proggy piece off of that album Minstrel in the Gallery. Really cool, just like epic acoustic track. Very, very, like I said, proggy, pastoral. It's just fantastic. Again, I love the melody in it and just the way Ian sings when he, on a cold wind to Valhalla, and he goes up into the falsetto. It suits the music and the mood of the track really well. And again, just another track that I could have on another day probably make the top 10 list. And the last one I want to talk about, again, another lovely, mostly acoustic number off of their second album, Stand Up. Great album. Reasons for Waiting. What a beautiful song this is. Again, just amazing acoustic work by Ian Anderson. The flute, the way that it has this sort of ethereal quality on the track, which just really takes you away. It really sets a tone. A beautifully arranged track, and I just love this song. And this almost was my pick for a song to represent Stand Up on my top 10, but it didn't quite make it. But yeah, on another day, this would easily make a top 10 list. So those are my honorable mentions of great Jethro Tull tracks. They're all amazing. Go listen to them. All right, so let's start with number 10. Number 10 is off of Jethro Tull's second album, Stand Up, which was really the album, I think, that established who they were as a band. The first album's very much like a sort of, I don't want to say blue, like derivative English blues record. It really isn't, because obviously the flute's in there. Ian's voice is very much its own thing, and they had their own style. But I really think what Jethro Tull would become really came to fruition in Stand Up. Like the seeds of it were born really in Stand Up. It's very musically diverse album. I think this is where you saw more of the sort of folky and eclectic influences come in. It still has that blues bass, which they very much moved away from after this, and I'd say the next album, Benefit. So we'll talk about We Used to Know, number 10. This is probably their most of all the tracks, aside from maybe A New Day Yesterday, where this is very much like a hard rock bluesy tune. Martin Barre, who I have not mentioned yet, who is a hugely important piece of Jethro Tull history, the longest running member in the band aside from Ian Anderson. His debut was on the second record, Stand Up, and he played all the way till Jethro Tull broke up in, I think, 2010, before they reformed a few years ago. And his guitar playing on this track is just amazing. There's such a great... The song fades on this just awesome killer electric solo by him that is just phenomenal. And the whole melody of the song, when I get to feel this way, it's just, the whole thing really does it for me. It's just a great hard rock piece, and just a really great example actually of heavy music. From this, the album would have been released around 1968, so this would probably be one of the first examples of some really heavy bluesy guitar playing for its time, actually. Yeah. And people kind of laugh because of Jethro Tull. Obviously there was that whole debacle where Jethro Tull beat Metallica for Best Heavy Metal Hard Rock Grammy Award, that whole thing. But they did get pretty heavy in the early days, especially at this time. They were really, compared to a lot of other bands out there, and this is right before Led Zeppelin, they were doing some heavy stuff, and this track is probably the prime example of that, with some just killer guitar, heavy riff, awesome tune. I love We Used to Know. Speaking of Jethro Tull's Grammy upset, where they beat Metallica, from that album, actually later on in their career in the late 80s, kind of their comeback album, Crest of a Knave, I have to give love to Budapest, which I think is one of the very best Jethro Tull songs. There's, the album itself isn't even, I would say it's a really good album. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but this song is just awesome. It's epic. It's got this song just takes you so many places. It really has its sort of like peaks and valleys. There's an amazing acoustic guitar solo by Martin Barre in this, which the way he plays, the only person I could possibly think of that he may not mirror in this, but like you could compare him to, would be somebody like Steve Howe. Just the way he kind of just moves up and down that neck. It's amazing what he does acoustically on this song. And the lyrics are pretty good. They're not Anderson's greatest lyrics, but I do really like the mood of this track. The melodies in it are so good. The flute playing is really good. It's just a really great track. And obviously it's got, people compare this album, and particularly this song, to Dire Straits because of Ian's sort of more restrained, kind of squeaky, nasally vocal, which people have compared to Mark Knopfler. He did recently have throat surgery before they recorded this album, which is probably the real reason he sounds like the way he does in the song. But it works the way, throughout the whole album, his vocal style really works, but particularly on this track, I think it works really well. It kind of gives it this sort of mellow mood to it, which is really well done. So yeah, number 9, Budapest, excellent song. Number 8 is the title track from the excellent Minstrel in the Gallery. This is such an amazing song. It starts out with just Ian with an acoustic guitar, the Minstrel in the Gallery. There's a little flute in there. It starts out like a lot of Tull songs do, kind of like We Used to Know. So I guess this is very telling the type of style of Jethro Tull song I kind of like, which they do a lot, but starting out very acoustically, and then Martin Barre just comes in with that electric guitar and just goes nuts, solos, and then we get that heavy riff with the dun 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 dun. Oh, it's so good. Very good good song, and I like the lyrics. They're very introspective. I take it it's sort of Ian's sort of like you know, him looking out at the audience from his vantage point, you know, being the minstrel in the gallery, sort of playing to everybody. Now, who know? I don't know if that's specifically what it is, but he kind of hints at this in other songs, and particularly another track, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I like that it's sort of like you're getting his viewpoint as the musician on stage playing to the audience. So that's kind of where my take of the song anyway. And it's just a great track, great riff, amazing guitar solos, amazing flute. It's phenomenal. So yeah, number 8, Minstrel in the Gallery. Number 7 is from Songs from the Wood, and it's the rather naughty bit Hunting Girl. So this song is about a dominatrix. There's no other way to say it. It's about a dominatrix, and it's done in that very tongue-in-cheek English humor, Monty Python sort of thing that Ian is known to do in songs. I like that about Jethro Tull. They never took themselves too seriously, even when they performed songs like this or many of their other tunes. There was always that humor, that sort of Monty Python injected into the show, the lyrics, and everything, and that's great. I love the way he does it. I think Ian is really great at doing that. He's sort of, I know he was a big fan and is influenced by Frank Zappa, so I think he kind of took what Frank did with humor, but did it better, I have to say, as big of a Zappa fan as I am. He's more subtle with it, and more, it just, to me, it's a little less cynical and more fun. It doesn't distract from the song or from the music in the way that I think Zappa can do, which puts some people off. But Ian's a bit more clever of a lyricist, I would say. And this track is it's kind of fun. It's got some of the rhythm is rhythmically, it's one of the most interesting Jethro Tull songs. Just the way it kind of sort of gallops through the song. It's the only way I know how to put it, really. Barrymore Barlow is a very, very underrated drummer, and I think his drumming on this track and a lot of other songs from this period is very, very interesting. And just everything, you know, this song is also very heavy on you know, you get a lot of keyboard and some of those arrangements that Dee Palmer does throughout the track, and it's very layered, but also it's a great song. It's catchy, you know. Dun 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 dun. Like, this is what I think makes Ian such a genius in terms of a songwriter and as a musician, because he can make these very intricate pieces of music, but he also makes them super catchy. So that's, to be huge, like such a huge talent to be able to do that. There's other bands I could think of that do that, like Talking Heads, or maybe some of like the 80s King Crimson era. Gentle Giant was very good at it. These bands and these artists that, David Bowie is a guy I think of that does it. These musicians that can make really, really complex music under the surface, but it's a catchy tune. You know, it's a catchy tune, and you don't feel bogged down by the musicality of it. So that's one thing I really love about this song, and particularly this period of Jethro Tull. Number 6, we're going to their biggest album. I have to put a couple tracks on here. It's also my favorite Jethro Tull album. Oh, Aqualung. And no, it's not the song Aqualung. Special mention to that too. It's not on the list, just so everybody knows. But Locomotive Breath. I mean, I have to put this on here. Charging, rhythmic, just... there's so much power to this track. It's one of those songs that's a hit song for a reason. Everything from the opening to that gorgeous piano intro that John Evan does, complemented by Martin Barr's, you know, riffing and soloing on top of it, leads up to that, you know, galloping sort of, you know, sounding like a steam engine going off the rails sound that is Locomotive Breath. And, you know, the lyrics I think are very poignant, especially today. I think they're very relevant. I think there's an overall theme of society just going, just at basically a metaphor for society as this big moving train that we can't stop, that just keeps going faster and faster and faster. And you know, it's very much reflective of the world we live in, and I feel like it definitely feel like the world is more and more like that as time goes on. So for Ian to write a song like this in 1971, 71, and for it to remain as relevant as it is, I think that's huge. But aside from the lyrical content, I think this is just a badass song. You know, the riffage, the soloing, the instrumentation. There's an awesome flute solo, of course, and yeah, just it's one of those songs where I think, like something like All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix, you know, I can't have the song overplayed. It's just a classic for a reason. So yeah, number 6, Locomotive Breath. Number 5, from the excellent Heavy Horses, the title track, Heavy Horses. This is such an epic. It's everything from that opening riff, the dan 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 do 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 dan 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 dan, to the, you know, sort of sweeping piano that comes in, and the way that John Evans' piano playing complements Ian's vocals. It basically starts out with this heavy riff, and then you come into this sort of ballady type sound, very rustic sounding. Ian's vocals on this whole album, but especially on this song, there's this raspy sort of rustic quality almost to his voice, which really, really works so well on this track. I think this track is just sort of an overall commentary on the whole nature versus technology, you know, farms disappearing or being industrialized by, you know, automation, things like that, which was very much becoming more of a thing at this point in time in the late 70s. So I think this was very much Ian observing this and, you know, living in the country and on a farm, just his, perhaps injecting maybe just a little bit of personal experience to it. I'm not sure, but you really get the feeling that he's, you know, obviously making a comment on just farming and just overall, I would say, humans' relationship between nature and technology with this. So really, really interesting, very introspective lyrics, and just a really epic piece. It's an epic track without being an epic track. I think this song is like 7 or 8 minutes, something like that. So it has that sort of epicness to it, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. The riff is super catchy. You know, the chorus, heavy horses, move the land under me. You know, it's very, very catchy melodies, awesome musicianship. Again, the arrangements by Dee Palmer is just phenomenal. Everything from the guitar and that bass sound that John Glasscock has, where that very thundering sort of galloping sounding bass, almost sort of pre-Iron Maiden, that kind of sound. Just like that, you really when he sings, you know, the heavy horses thunder by, and you really feel that galloping bass line. It just works so well with the track, and yeah, this has always been one of my favorite Jethro Tull tunes, and more than deserving of making the top 5 spot on this list. Heavy Horses, awesome song. Number 4 is a bit of a cheat. It's thick as a brick, the whole thing. All 40 minutes. Like, I don't know. It was impossible for me to chop this up. There are, like, chopped up versions of this where, you know, you can take 5 minutes here, 4 minutes there, whatever, and make them individual songs. But I'm just going to go with it and say the whole album. Yes, Thick as a Brick is one whole piece divided in 2. If you're going to put a gun to my head, I'll say that the first half is, I think, better. But there's so much just going on that is so interesting on this album and this song, and I love it. It's you know, Ian has said many times this album was meant to be sort of a response to critics saying that Aqualung was a concept album, which he insists it is not, and he decided, let's make the mother of all concept albums, and we'll just do a parody of the whole, you know, big progressive rock concept album thing, and then you get thick as a brick. So, which, you know, obviously for those who don't know, the album is supposed to be basically written by a 10-year-old boy, and it's supposed to be an entire send up of the whole concept album thing. Now, whether Ian is saying that in retrospect or whether that is the case, I don't know. But you know, there's definitely, you can tell there's a lot of humor in both the music and the lyrics. And from what I understand, in the 70s, that came across very much in the stage show as well, which I don't know of there being any footage of that, unfortunately. Would love to see that, but I digress. Yeah, Thick as a Brick is just, it's a masterpiece. It's one of those few albums where it's, yes, it's huge, it's overblown, but it works. There's not a boring part of this album. It is kind of like a bunch of songs mashed into one, but it's done so well and so seamlessly that I think, you know, they get away with it. And it was one of their biggest albums. So I mean, it was a number one record in the US and still has a legacy that is, you know, practically unsurpassed in the prog world. I think probably this and Close to the Edge and maybe like Court of the Crimson King are sort of the big triad of progressive rock albums. So yeah, I had to go with Thick as a Brick. I mean, it's, the whole thing is just amazing. Just the intricacy of the music, the tongue-in-cheek yet very interesting and sort of deep lyrics of the album as well. I don't know, the whole thing just works for me. It's crazy, it's bananas, I know, but it's awesome. You gotta listen to Thick as a Brick if you haven't heard it. And we're getting to the top three. This was very difficult. I had a hard time with this, but I think I'm happy with what I got. So number 3 is from the War Child album, the soul representation from that album. Good album, but not their strongest. But this track, Skating Away, hey, on the thin ice of a new day, hey, 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 hey. Yeah, this is one of my very, very favorite Jethro Tull tracks. It's probably lyrically my favorite song of his. Now, Ian has said, again, this is kind of him looking back in retrospect, that this is supposed to be about climate change, which I guess in the 70s the big thing going around was global cooling, hence the, you know, skating away on the thin ice of the new day, which obviously that was changed to global warming, and now I think they don't even call it that, they call it climate change. But the point is like, maybe that's the case, I don't know. I get a lot more from this song than just that. If that's the case, good on you, Ian, for, you know, being way ahead of the curve on something like that. But which obviously makes the song still relevant today for sure, because that's a big hot button issue today. But there's more to it than that. You get more of that sort of, again, there's literally a line in the song. Do you ever get the feeling that the story's too damn real or in the present tense, or that everybody's on the stage and it feels like you're the only one sitting in the audience? I butchered the last part of that a little bit, but again, I get this sort of feeling of Ian looking out at the world in a way, like he's the one observing us, even though he's the one on the stage, as in, like he talks about in Minstrel in the Gallery, where he's doing the observing. I don't know. There's the lyrics are very interesting and introspective. I always identify with that line very much. I really feel that way a lot. And I think we all feel like that sometimes. Just like, and in a way, I guess that would be our perception of the world. It would be sort of just like, it's almost like a show that you're watching, and you're sort of you're the sole member of the audience. Yeah, I know I'm explaining that badly, but that's kind of my take on that piece of the lyrics. But anyway, it's a beautiful song. I love just the amazing range of instruments on this song. And I know when they did this live, a lot of the band members would get up and, you know, they would each play different instruments. You know, maybe Martin Barr would go play the flute, and then the drummer Barrymore Barlow would play the glockenspiel or something, and then I don't know who played the accordion. John Evan got on the accordion or whatever. But the fact that the band members would get up and all play different instruments. Gentle Giant did that too, which I really, really liked. But and they you know, Jethro Tull were always, you know, looking for new sounds, weren't afraid to try incorporating different instruments that weren't necessarily rock instruments. A lot of folk and acoustic instruments into their music. And I always liked that about them. It made their music very interesting. So it's very, very prevalent on this song. It's a great little acoustic number with lots and lots of very interesting layers of different instruments in there that just don't belong in a rock song. But I love it. So, number 3, Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day. Number 2, this is the last song I will talk about from Songs from the Wood, which on some days is maybe my favorite Jethro Tull album, I don't know. And it's Velvet Green. I love everything about this track. Musically, it's one of the very most interesting Jethro Tull pieces. It's got like a sort of Baroque feel in the beginning, just the way it's played with the I don't know what that is, what kind of keyboard sound that is, if that's a synth that dun 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 dun, like just the way that that sort of Baroque sounding keyboard sound is, and then it's mixed with some light sort of, it sounds like almost like a xylophone, but it's not. I don't know off the top of my head the instrument. And you get the acoustic guitar and you get some flute in there. It's very like sort of cascading, moving. It's the way that the melody of the song goes is so interesting. It's very subtle, it's very intricate, but it's very melodic, and I really, really, really love it. And just the blend of all the instruments together, the acoustical instruments, you get the keyboard, so you get a little of the electronic side of things, and then of course you get a bit of the electric instruments as well. So it's just like it's a feast. It's a musical feast. Like just the amount of, first of all, the level of musicianship, and just the sheer number of different instruments playing in sync, and just all it just works so well for me. And it's got that sort of like rustic flavor to it. You can almost feel like you're on the Velvet Green, I guess, like you're in the wood and there's this little band playing. I don't know, but this song just really takes me to a place, and I've always really loved it. Well, this was actually kind of a grower track for me, I'd say. As I listened to this album more and more, I found that this song really, really stood out. And now whenever I listen to the album, it's the song I always look forward to the most. An amazing album, Songs from the Wood, and I think Velvet Green is the, let's say, velvet gold of the referencing the string quartets album of the album. It's an amazing track. On some days, maybe my number 1. But speaking of number 1, I had to pick something from my very favorite Jethro Tull album, and of course it's Aqualung, and the song is My God. Why did I choose My God? Several reasons. It's an epic track. I love this song. It's really the centerpiece of that album to me. It's kind of really the climax of the album. Not that the album dips, but it's just this big epic piece in the middle of the album. It's got everything. It's got an awesome riff, that awesome acoustic like intro, probably the most epic flute solo Ian Anderson ever did, especially on the Isle of Wight version. That is awesome if you ever get a chance to see that. But even the studio version is really great. And lyrically, I just love what he's talking about. I love the themes on the Aqualung album, which, I mean, he talks about it in Wind Up, Hymn 43, a couple other tracks. Very critical of particularly organized religion. I don't believe Ian's an atheist, but he's critical of, people, what have you done? Locked him in his golden cage, made him bend to your religion, and resurrected from the grave. He is the God of nothing, if that's all that you can see. So he's being very critical of, I would guess, fundamentalist organized religion, and the way that religion ironically sort of puts a chain on God, or maybe does, my interpretation, again, I don't know if this is specifically what Ian's saying, but like the way religion sort of tarnishes the name of God for some people, whereas religion can be so constricting and so rigid, probably I would imagine more so back in the early 70s when he wrote it, but where it pushes people away from the idea of God, even because of, just being way too strict and unreasonable, for lack of a better term, you know. Yeah, so I mean, I just love the lyrical content of that song, and those themes in the album. I mean, I'm always up for a little bit of poking at religion, poke at the hornet's nest. You know, I enjoy that, and I think Ian does it in a way where it's effective without being preachy. I would say, no pun intended, preachy. I think he does it in a way where he's just sort of. I think it almost sounds like a cry to me, like cry out for, like, you know, don't be so dogmatic and be open-minded to other things, and don't let your religion sort of make you close-minded. That's sort of my interpretation of it. I don't know exactly what Ian's experience is, or even what he really believes, but it's to me, it's especially for me. I think finding a record like Aqualung when I was a teenager, and having those questions myself. Not that I was really raised religious, but you know, everybody kind of gets to that point in their life, and I would imagine a lot of people face that at the age that I faced it at, you know, in my teens. Were a lot of these lyrics really spoke to me, and really I was like, I can get on with that, you know. So excellent lyrics, excellent songwriting, epic track. My God, the very best Jethro Tull song. So that's it. That's my top 10 favorite Jethro Tull songs. This was really hard to do. What are your top 10 favorite songs? I'm really curious about this because, as I said, I'm a massive Tull fan. Top 3 bands for me, probably. I think I said 5, but yeah, probably top 3 bands for me. I really love them. I've been in a Tull mood, so I thought it'd be fun to just kind of attempt to put a top 10 list together. If you've never listened to Jethro Tull, first of all, what are you doing watching this video? But second of all, check out, you know, my top 10 and maybe the honorable mentions. And if none of that suits your fancy, well, I guess you're not a Jethro Tull fan, but give them a good shot, because they're not necessarily, I mean, I liked them. I got into them very quickly, but they're, for a lot of people, I don't think they're just a band where it's like, oh, suddenly you're a fan. I think they're more of a grower band. So give them a good shot. You know, if you don't like any of the songs, maybe try. They're more of an album band too, so I'd recommend maybe Aqualung to start out. That was the album that got me into them. Or if you are more of a rock fan and don't really like the acoustical, whimsical stuff or the proggy stuff, give Stand Up a shot. I think you'd really like it. But anyway, that's it for me. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day. Peace.